Hey there. I'm here to give you just a brief introduction and overview of the Carbon Dioxide Removal Leadership Act, or S2096. This is new legislation that was introduced earlier this year by Senate Majority Leader Cynthia Stone Cream. What I'm going to do is just provide a little bit of background on carbon dioxide removal and then talk about the details of the bill, and then we can take some questions. So just to start off as well, I'm here representing the OpenAir Collective. OpenAir is a all-volunteer, now global advocacy network focused on advancing carbon dioxide removal legislation at both the state and national level. We have a very active membership in Massachusetts, and OpenAir has been centrally involved in the development of this policy and advocacy for it since it's been introduced. So again, what we'll be talking about is S2096, but I want to give you some context for why we think this is relevant within the Massachusetts context and the Commonwealth's specific nation-leading climate objectives. So first, to just start off with a basic definition of what are we talking about when we talk about carbon dioxide removal, or CDR. And this is a definition that we like from the Carbon Dioxide Removal Primer and an entry that was written by the current Department of Energy's carbon dioxide lead, Dr. Jennifer Wilcox. And these are just activities, like they sound, that take carbon that's already in the air and take it out of the air and store it in places where it'll stay for a long time. And so this is geology, terrestrial formations, ocean reservoirs, and even certain types of products like concrete. Very important just to specify before we talk in more detail about what carbon dioxide removal is in specifics, is what is it not? Because there's still a good amount of confusion, I think, around the term. And so carbon removal, first and foremost, is not a substitute for avoiding or eliminating future emissions or making necessary adaptations or investments in adaptation to inevitable climate change. It's already happening and will continue to happen. It's a third thing that we have to do in addition to those in order to preserve a livable climate, because we already have too much emissions in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide removal is also not, and it's often confused with, carbon capture and storage, or carbon capture and sequestration, or CCS. These are methods that stop carbon from going up into the air by capturing it and then putting it somewhere, usually industrial point sources from industrial steel production, for instance, cement production, certain other chemical and industrial applications as well. So CCS, although it shares some words and is often confused with it, CCS is a different thing than carbon dioxide removal. So what is carbon dioxide removal? Just in a little bit more specifics. First thing is it's necessary, and that's really what motivates this entire piece of legislation. And where do we get that from? It's really, this is based on the current state of the science. The leading global scientific body focused on climate change, the UN IPCC, for a number of years now has made it very clear that in order to preserve a safe and stable climate, we're going to have to remove lots of carbon out of the atmosphere this century. Billions of tons of it, actually. It's a very, very substantial undertaking. Again, in addition to eliminating emissions and investments in adaptation. It's also important that how do you do it? How do you actually take carbon out of the atmosphere? And the important thing is it's not just one thing. It's not just two things. Carbon removal, as it's emerging right now, is many different things. So we think about it in terms of a spectrum, different types of methods that are really quite dissimilar from each other. And so just to one that I think that people are probably most familiar with, understandably, is that forests are an amazing ancient source of carbon removal that naturally, through photosynthesis and storage, store carbon in forests. Our soils as well can store an enormous amount of carbon, and the process of storing carbon in soils actually has benefits for agriculture. So really, really important, and something that the Commonwealth is already focused on in its climate policy. But the reality is that can only get us so far based on how much carbon we actually have to take out of the air. And it's been estimated by the National Academy of Science that about, maximum about 40% of all carbon dioxide removal required could probably be achieved through these natural sinks, so forest and soil. So this is also acknowledged in Massachusetts' own decarbonization roadmap and in subsequent statements and documents, is that Massachusetts is going to have to, remove and sequester 4 to 9 megatons of carbon per year by 2050 And we're going to have to go beyond the Commonwealth's own natural and working lands or forest and agricultural lands in order to do that. So this has already been acknowledged already in the Commonwealth by policymakers. So what do we do fill the gap in with? What we goes by many different names, but you can generally call it novel CDR or novel carbon dioxide removal. And this includes, as I said, many different types of things. You have things which we sometimes call durable biostorage. That includes the burial of trees, things like biochar, mineralization, which are various different processes that convert carbon that's in gaseous form in the air into solid mineral form that then stays on or under the ground. Many different exciting forms of what we call marine CDR that involve the sinking of algae, things like the deacidification of the ocean through ocean alkalinity enhancement. Very, very fascinating area of carbon removal that has real application potential in Massachusetts. And then certainly direct air capture or DAC. And these are purpose-built machines that absorb carbon from the air, which is then put somewhere either in products or geologically. So that's just a high-level sense of the kind of spectrum we're talking about here. Carbon removal is also a massive opportunity. It's not just a cost. This has been estimated that this is going to be a future $1 trillion industry at some point. And that's one of the things that makes this very exciting for Massachusetts. Massachusetts already is a hotspot globally for carbon dioxide removal entrepreneurship and research. We have multiple different companies representing different forms of carbon removal, some very, very exciting ones based right here in Massachusetts. And we have a very healthy incubator ecosystem with Greentown Labs and some of the leading research groups in the United States and in the world that have been foundational to things like direct air capture and ocean or marine CDR are located right here in the state. So Massachusetts already has quite a healthy ecosystem that is poised to grow as the sector grows globally. And so now into the details of this bill and why we think it's so exciting. We think that this is an appropriate bill that can really catalyze carbon dioxide removal here in the Commonwealth, not only to ultimately achieve our net zero climate goals, but to really establish Massachusetts as a real hub globally for carbon dioxide removal, to make this really an export technology that's coming out of the Commonwealth. And so what does this bill do? This is what we call it's basically a carbon dioxide removal procurement program that would be established with this bill that would be administered by the state or by the Commonwealth. So this is basically where the state would begin to select and buy carbon removal each year from various different sources through a competitive process. So it's procuring or buying carbon dioxide removal. And what we like about this, again, in the long term, this is very much aligned with our net zero objectives. We already know that we can't reach net zero just by stopping emissions. We are going to have to sequester and store and remove carbon from the atmosphere. That's already acknowledged. So this is the first bill that really tries to put an actual policy and mechanism in place to get that started. This is something that many different jurisdictions around the world, nationally and subnationally, here in the US and abroad, this has already become an active area of policy, but nowhere has really sort of yet passed anything to actually really start to activate carbon removal within its own borders beyond some amazing stuff that's happening at the US federal level. But states are really, really necessary as well. And those states that begin to put these types of policies in place are going to capture a major advantage, so to speak. So this would really put Massachusetts to lead if and when it passes. And what we also like about the bill is it's sized appropriately. This is a new sector that's going to have to get bigger and bigger over the years. But right now, the main priority is let's just establish a program through which the Commonwealth can learn about carbon dioxide removal in addition to beginning to actually remove or support carbon removal projects. And so this is really a learning and discovery program that can then be built on after a period of time and expanded. But it's sized to help lay some track, as we say. And so the main elements of it are, again, is it's the purpose of it is let's start creating demand for CDR locally. Let's support local CDR projects by using state funds in a strategic and targeted way to support them. What we like about this too is it doesn't pick particular technology from that spectrum. Instead, it says, well, what do we want this? What kind of carbon removal do we want to do in terms of cost, social benefit, job creation? And let's create standards and then allow a number of different types of technologies and providers to compete to participate in this program. It also has multiple variable selection. Obviously, cost is really, really important in terms of buying carbon removal, but it also selects for prevailing wage and union jobs are given preference. It's also other economic or environmental benefits that happen at the local community level, particularly in frontline or environmental justice communities. So it scores multiple different factors when making selections. Multiple project types too, not just different technologies, but also small projects. It actually builds in certain percentage of them have to be relatively small, which allows for more community-based or community-owned assets, which we think is really, really important. And then it also is preceded before implementation by a community consultation process. So to make sure that communities around the state are educated and given an opportunity to give input before the program is actually implemented. And then once the project is implemented, there's actually a review process to make sure that projects that have been proposed don't pose any risks, and that they actually, in fact, will deliver on what they propose they will deliver. And then finally, it's only authorized for 5 years. As we said before, this is really a learning and discovery bill. This is something we think has to expand considerably between now and 2050. But right now, it authorizes this program just for 5 years so that we can establish some standards, establish some expertise, and learn how to procure carbon dioxide removal from multiple sources. And the fiscal impact of this is actually quite light because it is only a 5-year authorization, and it's relatively small amounts of carbon removal that would be purchased every year. And then it scales up each year for 5 years, starting off with a very small amount of 10,000 tons per year and then doubling each year for 5 years. And so the maximum cost of this, because there's actually a maximum price cap that comes with the bill, the maximum cost would be under $50 million for the entire 5-year period. But because it's a competitive process and it's competitive on the basis of cost, that's a maximum price. In all likelihood, it would actually be quite a bit lower than that. And the way that this would be funded is through the revocation of existing tax credits for commercial parts and aviation fuel that already exist, which is already a win for the climate by revoking those. And it's also a non-regressive way of funding this. So this type of repealing of it isn't going to hit the wallet of the average resident of the Commonwealth. So it's both paid for and we think fiscally responsible. And with that, that's pretty much all of it. Happy to take your questions, and thank you again for your time.